Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's BioAroundWorld 2022 June event, Cross-Border Healthcare Innovation and Partnership, co-organized by BioAroundWorld and MSQ Ventures. My name is Ziyan, a project manager at MSQ. It's my great pleasure to serve as today's host for the virtual event. Today's event will include two parts. First part is panel discussion, and the second part is knowledge sharing. Let's begin with the first part, the panel discussion, BioInvent&CASI successful case study from Alex Zukiwski and Andreas Mcallister, moderating by Jerry Isaacson.
Hello, thank you everybody for joining us for this BioAroundWorld event. I'm joined by Drs. Mcallister and Zukiwski for a discussion of partnerships in and out of China. My name is Jerry Isaacson. I'm a managing director at MSQ Ventures. And please allow me a moment to introduce our panelists today. Dr. Alex Zukiwski joined CASI Pharmaceuticals in April 2017 as their chief medical officer. Prior to joining CASI, he was a CEO and CMO of Arno Therapeutics and has been a director at Arno since 2014. His responsibilities there included leading the clinical development and regulatory affairs teams to support the company's pipeline. Dr. Zukiwski also previously worked at MedImmune, Johnson & Johnson, Roche, Glaxo Wellcome, and also Rhone-Poulenc. He has more than 21 years of experience in global drug development and supported the clinical evaluation and registration of many successful oncology therapeutic agents. He holds a bachelor's degree in pharmacy from the University of Alberta and a Doctor of Medicine degree from the University of Calgary. We're also very happy to be joined today by Dr. Andreas Mcallister. Dr. Mcallister has been the Chief Medical Officer of BioInvent since 2017. He received his Doctorate in Medicine and Surgery from the University del Rosario in Bogota and holds a PhD from the Institut Pasteur in Paris. He's performed academic work at the Pasteur Institute as well as at the University of California, San Francisco in cancer immunotherapy. Dr. Mcallister previously worked as a chief scientific officer at Debiopharm and held senior roles at IDM and BioMérieux and Pierre Fabre. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
So, in order to get started, the main topics for today's conversation are going to be, the ins and outs of collaboration between international companies and Chinese companies. And of course, the two companies you work for, CASI Pharmaceuticals and BioInvent, are collaborating on BI-1206 in oncology. And, in order to get started, I was hoping maybe Dr. Mcallister, you can give us a little bit of background on the asset and, kind of what's going on in terms of indications.
Sure. So BI-1206 is it's a very interesting monoclonal antibody. It targets a receptor called Fc gamma receptor 2b, which basically is part of the family of Fc gamma receptors. Fc gamma receptors basically bind antibodies by the tail, if you will, of the antibody, and instruct the cell that bears that receptor what to do with whatever is in front of it. So be it a virus, a bacterium, or a cancer cell. Of course, our interest is in cancer. So basically, it is actually, interestingly, is the only inhibitory receptor. So it resembles what happens with T cells and the brakes of that aspect of the immune system. This is the brakes of the innate aspect of the immune system. So Fc gamma receptor 2b is the only inhibitory receptor in humans. And it's interesting because if you block it, you can expect to enhance the activity of other antibodies that you combine with BI-1206. In addition to that, in the context of B-cell malignancies, There is an additional potential, which is that that Fc gamma receptor 2b, so this inhibitory receptor, is born by the tumor cells. So if you target that receptor, you basically inhibit a formation of a trimer that internalizes CD20. If you lose CD20 from the surface, you lose the activity of anti-CD20 antibodies such as rituximab. So in the first setting that we started developing this drug was in combination with rituximab for the purpose of treating B-cell malignancies, non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and the like. I hope that was not too complex, but it is complex biology, but very, very interesting.
No, absolutely, very interesting. You also have a development program in combination with Keytruda. Can you talk a little bit about the rationalization?
Yes, so actually, after we had started the development of BI-1206 in non-Hodgkin lymphoma, there were several groups around the world that published the notion that Fc gamma receptors and Fc gamma receptor 2b in particular was also important in modulating the activity of anti-PD-1 agents, anti-PD-L1 agents, etc. So that was important because, of course, as you know, as everyone more or less knows in oncology today, these are great agents that have really revolutionized the way cancer is treated in a number of malignancies. But unfortunately, a lot of the patients, a large percentage of patients responds. The majority of the patients do not respond, and those patients that do respond eventually have progressive disease or stop responding to these otherwise excellent treatments. So those groups around the world, led by Jeffrey Ravitch at the Rockefeller Institute, Michel Pittet at Harvard University, showed that if you actually that by blocking these receptors, and in particular Fc gamma receptor 2b, you could enhance the activity and help improve the response rates to those agents. BioInvent did his homework, and we showed that when you combine BI-1206 with agents such as pembrolizumab, you enhance the activity of pembrolizumab. So that's the basis of that study in solid tumors.
Great, thank you. I really appreciate that. And I just one more thought about the asset. Is there any thoughts about developing this as a single agent? So
you could imagine developing BI-1206 as a single agent. This said, in the context of B-cell malignancies, and in particular in some settings where you would have very high expression of Fc gamma receptor 2b. This said is not ideal, and you would lose on the main mechanism of action, which is inhibition of that trimer formation that gets rid of CD20 from the surface of the B-cell malignancies. So while there may be some single agent activity, the best of the mechanisms is that one that enhances the activity of anti-CD20 targeting agents such as rituximab.
Great. Yeah, no, thank you for that background. I really appreciate it. So, of course, you out-licensed for part of the collaboration of the development of this drug to CASI in China. And so, Dr. Zukiwski, I was wondering if you can maybe give us a little bit of an update on the progress of the partnership and maybe upcoming milestones for the development program.
So, Jerry, let me take a step back and tell you how we got here.
Yeah, please.
CASI is a US-based NASDAQ-listed company, and our goal, and we have a major focus in China, our goal is to bring innovative investigative products to China, and to also bring in those commercialized products outside of China that will fit and fulfill an unmet medical need. So our BD team was extremely active, and the initial engagement with BioInvent, we looked at this asset, and the first response was, wow, this could be applied to multiple potential therapeutic antibodies that are currently in clinical use, and we could substantially amplify their utility for patients with various malignancies. So in our due diligence process, my BD colleagues and myself, we undertook an extensive due diligence, and I had the opportunity to meet my colleague Anders. And being the inquisitive nature that we are, we requested to take a deep dive on the individual patient level data set. And at that point in time, Anders is like the emperor who opened the robe and said, "What do you want to see?" And he took us through every single data point and put up with our numerous questions and queries over hours and hours to confirm what we felt was going to be just an absolutely fantastic potential program that needed to be put through its paces, outside of China. And we started to postulate, okay, what could we do with this asset? How would we build a global development program piggybacking with our colleagues at BioInvent? So it was readily apparent that the entire BioInvent team was open. Anders and his team and the rest of the team on the project development team, extremely forthcoming, dealt with all of our questions. And that was a great way to kick off the collaboration. Once the deal was struck and the various teams were put together, you could just see how things were going to start to gel. And I think a tremendous amount of the success that we have had to date is based 100%, or all of it, is based on the collaboration that we have between the two companies. Do we agree on everything? Oh, absolutely not. It's like my wife and I, we never agree on everything. Just she's the boss and she tells me what I'm supposed to do. So, but the collaboration at the project team level, at the joint steering committee level has been absolutely fantastic. Such that when we are making requests, which sometimes don't always seem to follow the European regulatory authority or the FDA logic, our colleagues at BioInvent, were extremely accommodating, bending over backwards to make sure that we got what we needed in a timely fashion. The application, the clinical trial application, was submitted in what I'd like to describe as a rapid time frame with all the translations and everything else that was required. The CTA was approved, Anders, last year in December of 21, if I remember correct. And we subsequently got to the IRB approval in the first quarter of 2022. So the project in China is moving forward. What we are intending to do is to emulate the BioInvent rituximab 1206 combination. Fortunately, we do not necessarily have to go to the lowest dose levels because of the ex-China experience. We have drug product in customs now, and we hope to announce the first patient in the ensuing few weeks. We are very optimistic that this program will allow us to achieve a recommended phase 2 dose of the combination of BI-1206 plus rituximab, which will emulate the dose that is being tested outside of China. At that point in time, our stated goal has been to piggyback with our colleagues at BioInvent into the global registration program. We feel that under their leadership and when they have all of the feedback from the FDA, from the European Health Authority, and we get feedback from China, we will be able to move the program forward very swiftly, taking advantage of the large patient population that exists in China. So it is truly a collaboration. We're always looking at what's next. Fortunately, there's, I get to have a window on the world for a BI-1206 every week, every 2 weeks, depending upon when the meetings occur. And so there's no surprises on either side for either company.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate that. Kind of building on that, I wonder maybe if I can go back to you, Dr. Mcallister, and ask, what was the view of the, forging this partnership from your point of view? And, what were some of the hurdles that you had to overcome in order to successfully get the transaction done?
Yeah, so it was very interesting experience, and one that shows you how important your feelings are when getting to the point where you're going to sign a deal with another company that, of course, in a geography that we didn't know, etc. So, we did go through a number of discussions with a number of different companies, etc. And of course, we felt there was a great deal of synergy, we were basically on the same page with our colleagues at CASI. That was a feeling from the start. And as we went through this diligence process that Alex was commenting on, we also felt with this team, we feel that we can go far away. They have exactly the same goals. Having a lot of experience in creating partnerships in my previous life, I know how important that is. If you may have two great companies, but if they don't understand what they're doing together, there is no way it'll work, even if you have a great drug in your hands. A basis, an essence to be able to do that is to have to be on the same page, to be working on the same direction with the company, to really have synergistic possibilities with the company that you're working with. And that's precisely how we feel. I totally can echo what Alex was saying with respect to BioInvent. We absolutely feel in exactly the same way when we work together with the CASI team. It is a pleasure. It is the key words are flexibility, transparency, collaboration, exchanges, etc. That's what happens on our daily lives, and it is a great experience to be working with them, and in that situation. It's really a pleasure.
And I must thank my colleagues at BioInvent for the patience. Keep in mind when you're dealing with a development program and development team in China, many times their first language is not English. And so periodically there's a learning curve. We have to summarize, we have to be patient, we have to make sure that everybody understands, even at a midpoint during a conversation, where the team is going, etc. And after a couple of months, 2, 3, 4, things get just dramatically easier. I mean, very much so. Everyone knows how people are thinking, what their time frame is in terms of the response. So, we're bouncing to Sweden, to the US East Coast, to China. And so we run around the globe on a constant basis.
Yeah, so it's interesting. You're thanking Dr. Mcallister for his patience while he's thanking you for bringing in patients to the trial.
Yes.
Well, from the outside perspective, we often read about these deals getting done in the news every day, and that's the big news item that everybody talks about. But fewer people talk about kind of the execution of the agreement once it's done. And I would kind of, maybe building on your Dr. Zukiwski's analogy, it's kind of like the partnership and agreement is kind of the engagement, and after that it's like a marriage. And I know, Dr. Mcallister, you always mentioned this, you already touched on this a little bit, but I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the difference between kind of the engagement and the marriage.
This has been a happy marriage, so very difficult to criticize. Everything has run very smoothly. When there is trouble, everyone runs in the direction in order to try to solve the issues, etc. You know, there's always issues with these things, in particular when you're sending drug from one continent to another one. And something that we must not forget, this was done in the context of COVID. So the difficulties were multiplied. Here we've been working with Alex together for the past 3 years or so. We have not been able to have one dinner together. That's how difficult it has been. And we promised each other that we would meet in Shanghai or in Beijing or in New York or one of these places. We were just about to be able to meet at ASCO. Unfortunately, we were not able to do it. And so it's been the context has been extremely difficult. But this said, we've been able to manage. We've been able to overcome all those questions. We're super happy that the Chinese team is going to begin enrolling patients in weeks, as Alex mentioned. That will generate data that will be super useful for the program, be it for the Western world or for the Chinese region. And I think we're super happy that this is happening and the way it's happening, etc.
Yeah, I mean, I think you bring up a really good point about the challenges that we've all faced in terms of not having face-to-face meetings. And I think it's definitely a testament to the trust that you have for each other and the strength of the partnership that you've been able to do to complete this without ever even having a handshake. And so hopefully here in the near future, that's a problem that will be overcome. I'm going to leave this open to whoever wants to answer. And I know, the details of this question might be limited at this point, but I wonder if you could give us any idea about kind of the overall picture that you see for a phase 3 trial in terms of, endpoints, patients, timelines, just how it might look from right now. Obviously, we don't know exactly how it's going to play out, but what you're kind of thinking right now.
Yeah. Do you want me to go, Alex?
Yeah, go ahead, Anders, please. I'll follow.
So something that we would like to mention is that the team has been extremely busy working on a subcutaneous formulation, because you might know that we encountered some infusion-related reactions with this asset, and even though we were able to dose it without any serious consequences, those events, we can manage that, and this we can do it with by using a subcutaneous formulation. We've been working very hard. We have produced a GMP batch. It's basically ready. We are characterizing it, etc. We should be in patients in maybe sometime by the end of Q3 of this year, perhaps Q4. But we will be in patients very soon with that formulation, and I think that's going to be a game changer for the project. So why do I say that? Because if the data is what we expect it to be, and we have, of course, all the animal data to support it, we will very likely move into subcutaneous formulation for the pivotal study, which would be obviously the next study that we would undertake. So in that sense, it's difficult to say when will we begin the pivotal study, because it will depend on the way the emerging data with the subcutaneous formulation. But this said, we did have a end of phase 1 meeting with the FDA. Of course, we also need to consider the Chinese authorities and the European authorities. something that is difficult in this specific setting is that this is, of course, an orphan drug and an orphan indication, or these are orphan indications. In that context, we have a great deal of hopes. Alex and his team have will begin dosing patients in some of the most important centers, in hematology centers in China, that will bring about a lot of potential in terms of being able to recruit more readily. I think that's important. What would a phase 3 study look like? We must understand the role of BI-1206. So we need to do some, at least some randomization, so that we understand we can isolate that aspect of BI-1206. And we will have to look into the indications that we are targeting independently. So we need to look at mantle cell lymphoma, which is one where we think this drug has a great deal of potential, and also follicular lymphoma. So those are the key drivers. When you think about that, of course, we would like to go for conditional approval in the US. That is totally possible. And every drug in the space has followed that path in recent years. So that is totally possible. If we are able to meet those expectations of the FDA and the other jurisdictions, we should be able to get that approval with the next study.
So Jerry, CASI is extremely supportive of the BioInvent plans. We will launch our program with the IV formulation, but when we look forward with both companies in mind and see how we can manage the safety profile most effectively of BI-1206, the subcutaneous formulation may give us a tremendous opportunity to have a safe and effective drug combination for patients with relapse refractory non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. So we are eagerly looking forward to working with BioInvent on all aspects of the development program, and we would like to jump in as soon as possible.
And maybe I should add something that we're also working very hard on, which is trying to understand how the level of expression of Fc gamma receptor 2b may drive clinical responses. So that is something that we're working very hard. Of course, if we can establish a cutoff of expression and some correlation with clinical responses, that would allow us to put in place a test that could let us better pick the patients that we will treat. And you could go into other areas, of course, such as more difficult to treat non-Hodgkin lymphoma, large B-cell lymphoma, things like that, and perhaps other areas, and really improve the response rates by better choosing the patients. And we're working very hard on that as well.
A predictive biomarker, which would subsequently translate to a companion diagnostic to treat the most appropriate patient population and not to treat those patients that are not going to benefit, would be welcomed.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's definitely a strategy that a lot of people are looking at right now.
Precision oncology.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, thank you both for that perspective and for that information. I appreciate it. So, pivoting a little bit, I wonder, Dr. Zukiwski, if you could talk to me a little bit, from a Western perspective, about what have been like the most effective strategies and, key areas of knowledge that you've relied on in order to integrate a China clinical program into the kind of broader global clinical ecosystem.
So Jerry, this is actually simpler and easier and more straightforward than one would think. In China, the standard of care is very reflective to ex-China. You know, the vast majority of therapeutic agents, therapeutic classes are available. Periodically, they take longer to get approved, but when they get into the marketplace, many of them are already investigated in the major institutions in China. You'll find that new therapeutics get adopted very quickly. Keep in mind that many of our very senior clinical investigators have been trained, educated outside of China. So they're very used to, you know, the adaptation of Western technologies, etc. So I look at it as the standard of care in China, just like it is anywhere else, is evolving. And it's evolving at a pace that is directly proportional to the number of new therapeutic targets that are being introduced and how they find their way, perhaps from the initial indication in a third-line setting, how they find their way up into a first-line setting. So with our colleagues, we are constantly watching, is there going to be a shift in care? How will we integrate, you know, BI 1206 into that standard of care? What is the pivotal trial that's going to be needed to get into the marketplace, to get the first approval? And how are we going to manage the life cycle of this extremely interesting compound at the end of the day? So there's not a week or not a month that goes by that we don't do a constant reassessment of what is coming in, what's going to be going out, you know, is there going to be a shift in standard of care? Is there an opportunity for BI 1206 in the treatment portfolio, in the treatment milieu, in the regime? And so this is it's a constant reiterative process, Jerry.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I really appreciate that. So, you know, going back to you, Dr. Mcallister, I wonder if you could talk just a little bit more broadly about your partnering strategy and the value you see of partnering. I mean, obviously, BioInvent is also partnered with MSD and Transgen. And I wonder if you could just mention, you know, kind of what your overall strategy is when you think about whether or not to partner and how to partner your assets.
So for us, partnering is very important. We have a platform that is highly productive, and this is due to the history at BioInvent. We have a very well characterized monoclonal antibody library based on phage display technology, and this combined with looking at immunological targets that are identified by a platform called FIRST, actually produces very interesting antibodies. It produces new targets, etc. So we've been able to, in the past 4 years, we now have 5 programs in clinical development, and actually next year there will be a 6th. So there's the productivity of the platform has been really productive and very efficient. What that actually means is that we welcome partnerships such as the one with CASI. We have been foregoing and looking into that possibility. It's a rapidly evolving area, especially this area of immuno-oncology. So, we can't do everything that we would like to do. And so partnering is super important for us and for the company and for our investors.
So I'd like to take that. Thank you, Dr. Mcallister. And I'd like to take the same question and kind of flip it around in reverse for you, Dr. Zukiwski, since of course your strategy is more of whereas BioInvent is focused more on out licensing, CASI is focused more on in licensing. I wonder if you could just talk about your ideas of that type of business model.
Our success is going to be directly proportional to the number of new compounds we bring in. Our first product, Evamela, has been launched and is doing extremely well. And that was a deal struck with Spectrum a number of years back. If you go to our website, you'll see who we've partnered with for other pipeline assets. But we are constantly looking for, a novel asset, an asset that will fulfill an unmet medical need in China and our territories. And we intend to build and continue to build, but we have to be smart about it. We are a small company. We do not have the resources of multinational pharma firms, and it has to fit in our portfolio. We are focused on oncology and malignant hematology, and such that, if we could find another asset that we could do a quick bolt on the commercial side, I can guarantee to you that my boss would be extremely interested in, another product in the bag of our very efficient and productive sales force in China would be really nice to have.
So it sounds like you're open to partnerships on kind of the whole spectrum of development, from early
range.
clinical to late clinical to commercial.
That we would be. We would not turn down an opportunity. We've done many due diligence assessments over the past 12 to 24 months. Our BD leader, Jim Goldschmidt, is very experienced, very wise, and knows how to get things done at the end of the day.
Excellent. Yeah, no, thank you. I appreciate both of your perspectives on that. So I want to turn to another slightly different topic. And then really, Dr. Zukiwski, I think this is a question directed for you. As we know, there's been a number of regulatory changes in terms of the NMPA reforms over the last 5 years, as well as changes to the reimbursement and insurance policies for China. And I was wondering if you could talk about how these regulatory developments have encouraged your efforts and what that means for Chinese collaborations.
So I'm going to put it in a slightly different way.
Please.
The regulatory bodies around the globe are constantly changing and having increasing or slightly different requirements, whether it be in the United States, Europe, China. And as global drug developers, we have to adapt. We have to see, where is the FDA's position? Do they want us to take two doses of our investigational drug into the phase 2 setting, and to look for not just a maximum tolerated dose, but an optimal dose based not only on safety, but on PK, on pharmacodynamic markers, etc. So the same thing if we're going to enter into a global study with a partner. We have to consider what are the changing regulatory opinions, not only in China, but in the United States, Europe, and the other major competent health authorities that are going to give us guidance on what we're going to need. So I look at it as, okay, what's happening this week? What do we need to do? What do I need to tell our partners in Sweden about that is emulating coming out of China? And it is truly data-driven. We need to develop safe and effective drugs. And in today's environment around the globe, nobody is willing to pay for a drug that is going to be minimally effective anymore. We have to be, very creative. Precision oncology, the right drug for the right patient. And around the globe, the health authority, the reimbursement agencies will pay for innovation if it brings value. So we always have to keep that in mind. And like any place else in the world, there's always constant pressure from the reimbursement agencies to keep the costs, at a, their job. Our job is to innovate. Their job is to, provide care for their population. So there's got to be a balance there.
Yeah, of course, and that's a challenge that's only going to continue. I wonder, kind of building on what you were just talking about, have you found, obviously all the different regulatory agencies around the world have the same goal of bringing the most innovative and effective drugs to their populations. Do you find that for the most part, the demands of the different regulatory agencies are overlapping, or are there different hurdles that you have to jump through because the agencies might see certain questions in a different light?
I can tell you that you have to deal with, I have projects that are being run in Europe on the CASI side. You have to deal with, the MHRA, ANSM, the French and the British Health Authority, and I deal with the Chinese Health Authority on the other side. So you just have to be aware of what their different requirements are going to be. The way that a medical reviewer may view the safety reports and the safety profile of a project running in the United States versus how that medical officer will review those reports in China may be slightly different. And sometimes they need additional background, additional translation and a summary, etc. So one needs to be able to adapt, and don't be surprised at any point in time that there's what we might describe as, this is an unusual request. Okay, it may seem unusual to me, but we just have to get down, do the work, and get them what they need. It's our job to facilitate their understanding.
That makes sense. And so, Dr. McAllister, of course, working from Europe, you have a number of different regulatory agencies within Europe, and of course, you always have an eye on the FDA, and now, of course, NMPA as well. Can I get your thoughts on the same question?
Yeah, so I can definitely echo what Alex said, and I would probably add that the dialogue with the regulators is of the essence. So if you're discussing with FDA, it's important that they see exactly what your plans are, what you're trying to do, and engage that conversation with them. And same thing with European or Chinese authorities, and understanding where they're coming from. They are different, and they expect different things. But in that context, the conversation and the early and ongoing conversation with the regulators, I think is really of the essence. You can identify what their susceptibilities are, what they have a visibility over a number of things that you don't. So whatever message they convey, I think it's a good thing to integrate it into your development plans.
Absolutely. Makes sense. And I think that Dr. Zukiwski, you make a good point of ultimately, the regulatory agencies are going to ask for what they're going to ask for. And it's up to the companies to just be prepared for that. And they're not going to bend over backwards to help you. You have to be prepared to give them what they want.
Exactly, Jerry. At the end of the day, CASI and BioInvent, when the pivotal trial is completed for the registration of BI 1206, we're going to move forward with a global filing. And that means there's going to be questions from all of the health authorities that are going to come through. Some will be the same, some will be very similar, and others you'll go, okay, this is going to take the programmers and the statisticians a couple of hours to get this data set for them. It is the way we work and how we work. It just has to get done.
Yeah. So, I think we have just a couple minutes left here, but I wonder if I can just get some closing thoughts from each of you, just on really anything that we've talked about, or any thoughts you have that maybe I didn't ask about, Dr. McAllister?
No, just reiterate how this has been a great collaboration. When you think back, you really feel you made the right decision in moving forward, and with our partners, and we're extremely happy about that. I think it's a good case study. It doesn't always work so well, and we're extremely happy to be able to do this with CASI. That as Alex said, is an American Chinese company, so it has that huge perspective for us, and we highly value their input, their working together, etc.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Zukiwski, any final thoughts?
I can only reiterate what Anders has stated. It's important to have that relationship. It comes right from the very beginning. Open, transparent, and we're not afraid to disagree with each other. We're not afraid to ask questions about, well, are you, why do we want to do that? And if you don't have that dialogue and that trust, and there's no malice ever meant by asking a question, you don't get anywhere.
So I think that if one thing is abundantly clear to me, it's just like any relationship, open and honest communication really seems to be the key to both getting the deal done and then making sure that it works.
Yep.
As time goes on. I think that everything that you've shared with us here today has been very informative for me and hopefully for our listeners in terms of, companies who are thinking about partnering around the world. And so let me just take one more opportunity to thank you both very much for your time. I really appreciate your insights, and we'll look forward to having you guys having dinner together and having a good handshake when the global environment allows it.
Very soon.
Right. Thank you so much. Thank you,
Okay,
Gary.
thanks,
Thank
guys.
you, Alex.
Appreciate it.
Bye.
Bye.